Our panel today, Rick Baker. Rick is the Managing Director of Blackbird Ventures and an INCUBATE mentor. He used to be with MLC's venture capital portfolio, and he's also founded 2 successful software companies himself. He has multi-million dollars worth of money available for entrepreneurs. So what we're going to do is we're going to pitch to him all day. If that doesn't work, we're going to mug him on the way out. So that's Rick there. Please welcome to the stage Petra Andren, who is the Director of ATP Innovations and also an INCUBATE mentor. ATP Innovations is Australia's leading technology business incubator. She was also a founder of the Biohackathon. Is that how you say it?
Biohackathon, yeah.
Biohackathon.
Yeah.
There you go. Next, we've got Orawan Limnalong, who is the founder of MakeUpSocial, an online social network that provides beauty advice and products for women. We're running out of couch space. I'm sure you all know about it. She's currently she's raised seed round of investment and currently has over 15,000 users on this app and is developing it at the moment. And we finally have Alan Noble, Engineering Director of Google Australia, who's been involved in a lot of startups over the years, including NetMind, which developed the internet's first change detection service. Don't know what that is. Presumably it was down the back of the couch. I'm not sure, but so he's been involved in a lot of different startups around the world and is now here at Google in Australia. So let's get on to the questions. And it'd be fair to say that the starting question is a little bit of a leading question. You are allowed to disagree with it, but do that at your own risk. And that question is, why do student entrepreneurs have the biggest impact on the world? See what I mean? Slightly leading, but, you know, that's what we're coming for. So, Rick, do you want to start us off?
You want me to start? Okay. So, I was thinking about this as I walked here this morning, and I thought there were 3 reasons why it's great to start things at university. Number 1, you can learn to code. I'm a real believer. How many people can code in this room? Good. Yeah, I'm a real believer that if you can code, you have so much better chance of starting a successful business. If we think of, you know, most of the people who started their businesses while at university, around university, or dropped out of university, it was because they could code, right? They could build something from nothing by themselves. So that's number 1, learn to code. I think we should, Startup Oz should be pushing for coding to be compulsory in every first year university course. Even if you're doing something
just in arts,
particularly if you're doing arts, you should do it.
Noted. We'll push for that.
Thank you. Okay, number 2. Okay, it's a time of your life when you can take risks, right? You haven't got, you know, for most university students, you haven't got this mortgage, you haven't got kids to deal with.
We refer to that as baggage.
Baggage, exactly. You've got less baggage, and you can do these things, right? And then number 3, you're hanging out with like-minded people, and it's always teams that found companies, and there might be one founder that stands out and is the initial impetus, but there's teams, right? And you get to meet people that are like you get to hang out with them, you get to go to the pub with them and talk about crazy things. That's what I have to say about it.
That's a good start. Who wants to take up from there? Alan, do you want to keep going?
Well, I totally agree with what Rick said, but I think there's another reason. I think students are looking at the world around them with just fresh eyes. They're not jaded. Anything's possible. You know, you get old like me and suddenly like, oh, I'm not sure if we can do that. You know, when students, you know, it's fresh. Everything's fresh. It's the same reason we just love, you know, to hire, you know, from universities, because you get that kind of freshness, that vitality. So, yeah, it's a time in your life when you can take chances. Totally agree with that. But it's also, you know, you're at I guess, a stage in your life where anything is possible. And that's the right time to go for it, because anything is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, Petra.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach here because I have to. I believe not just in coding, but I believe in the convergence of technologies. I love the fact when you see something, truly disruptive things, I think, oftentimes happen when IT meets life sciences, say, or, you know, hardware meets life science, whatever it might be. And I think at university you have that. You know, it's a multidisciplinary environment, and when it comes to startups, it's not just one entrepreneur, it's often a team. And I think you can find that team when you're at university, and I think you can find those ideas, you can get that convergence of ideas whilst you're at university. I think it's a great platform.
Orawan, as the actual university entrepreneur here, what do you think is do you think that university is a good place to start? What do you think of the comments that have been given so far?
I really think it's, I think the initial thing is really in the person itself. If you have that DNA of that entrepreneurial spirit, I think once you have it, you can't stop. I think that's one of the things. And then the second thing is, what's interesting is that you're seeing successful entrepreneurs come out of universities. I think it could be as a result of, you know, what Alan and Rick were saying, that you're at a time of your life where there's very little risk. And then I think the secondary factor is more so like, I guess, you know, to get into university, you have a certain work ethic, and you work hard. And, you know, everyone at university is really just a bunch of nerds. And, you know, to get into university, yeah, you got to work hard. And I think you can apply that same work ethic to your startup if you're really passionate about it. And like what Petra was saying, the environment of university really just builds your social skills, your character, and your confidence. And I think that's the place, when you come out of high school, I think that's at a stage in your life where you build those kind of social skills.
So, and can you code?
No, I cannot,
So
unfortunately.
you can't code making an app. See, what are you talking about, Rick? It's
I know.
you can get coders there somewhere.
But I do agree with Rick. I think if you have like a technology background, and especially if your product is tech, I think there's a big advantage, because, you know, I've had some issues with, you know, outsourcing and stuff because I didn't understand tech. So I think tech is important in your education, especially if you're building a tech product.
And I should say that I don't mean learning like the deep intricacies of coding and etc. I mean knowing enough to know, you know, how to put things together, how the stack and the architecture works for a web server, you know, how to communicate with tech people, all that sort of stuff is really, really useful. I reckon it's even better if you can actually write it yourself. But
if I can
it's
add to that,
stuff that's really important.
It's about the team. I think if you're running a tech company, you know, you may. And you're a tech person, you may need a business person. But if it's about tech, you need to at least have the skills to be able to manage tech and understand it.
Yeah.
So we see it over and over again where there is a person with an idea, but they can't actually implement the idea in a different way other than outsourcing it. And outsourcing it is oftentimes an issue. So if you can have that skill on board in your team, it's about the team, and it's about having a multidisciplinary team. That's really important.
I want to go back to that idea of the environments created at a university. It's interesting. We got a work experience kid in our office at the moment, and he was asking questions yesterday. And we realized that pretty much everyone in our office had started some kind of comedy venture at university, worked on it for years there, and it had kind of slowly been shit for many years and slowly kind of grown from there. And I think looking back, it was that ability in university to kind of almost incubate. It's an environment where you can kind of fail a bit more, you can take risks and do that kind of thing. And often that's the criticism of us, like, you know, when you talk about San Francisco as a place, you know, they accept failure in the broader community in terms of if you fail, it doesn't mean you can't come back and do it again. Do you think that is part of the reason that universities are a good place to start this kind of entrepreneurial spirit in Australia?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that your comment about Silicon Valley, you know, one of the defining characteristics of Silicon Valley is, you know, failure is never permanent. It's something that it's a learning, it's an experience. And in fact, you know, if you fail honorably, meaning you didn't lie, cheat, or steal, or do anything unethical, it's actually not a failure. It's actually called experience. So I think university is a much more conducive environment to trying out new things. And the thing about failure is, you know, if you're constantly failing, kind of like incrementally failing, it's not really failure, really. It's actually like learning. And I think this is an area where Australian culture as a whole, I think, could actually learn from our friends across the Pacific. But I do see you know, lots of more than glimmers of hope. I'm seeing a lot of graduates coming out that are much more you know, much more open to like trying things, and you know, and I think that is in part because of the culture that you know, universities encourage. I would like to see that go way back into education, all the way back to primary school. I don't see why we can't be encouraging our primary school kids to have a go and do. I mean, it kind of happens a little bit, but it's very ad hoc. You know, the lemonade stand and stuff like that. So
if I see a primary school kid driving past me in a Ferrari because he's got an app, I'm going to die. Okay, it's just not going to.
See, that's the problem. You used to say, "Wow, that kid's amazing." I mean, we've got to revere our successful entrepreneurs. Absolutely. You know, we love our sports heroes. You know, we love our movie celebs. You know, we love them to death. And yet our successful entrepreneurs is like, huh? What do they do? You know, why do I care? And failed entrepreneurs, oh my goodness, like, you know, we crucify them. So I think this is a cultural thing, and it starts with the education system, and I think universities are absolutely at the, you know, forefront of where we can kind of make that cultural change. So short answer is yes.
So I guess we've got both students and we've got, I guess, people working in the entrepreneur world here, and there was the discussion about the kind of freshness of ideas at university, and I guess that ability to take risks and develop ideas, but in a way that I think part of the reason for that is that university is a bit of a cocoon at first. Now, what's interesting about this idea and about INCUBATE is that kind of the breaking out of the cocoon and going into the real world and taking the ideas and going, okay, I've had this idea at university, seems like a cool idea, my friends like that idea, but now I'm going to actually go out into the world and I'm going to try and have people take me seriously. So I want to, I guess, get everyone's perspectives on, you know, as a university entrepreneur about how to do that, how to take those steps, and, you know, what are the differences between the university level and going to the next step. So Petra, do you want to talk us through that first?
Oh, that was a tricky question. Going from the university level and taking it to the next step. Look, I think, obviously, with programs like INCUBATE, it's fantastic. It wasn't there before. I teach entrepreneurship at University of Sydney, and I've been doing it for about a year now. We've changed the whole course, but I think at university, I think it has to change. I think how you teach entrepreneurship has to change. I think it has to be problem-based learning rather than just academic framework. I think you need to promote internships. I think you have to connect the university with the real world in order to break up, like you said, break up the cocoon. I think we need to have internships for credit points. I think we should have credit points for running your startup. Wouldn't that be great? That's very controversial. But wouldn't that be great if we could do that, if we could think about things like that? There's so many opportunities to break out of that cocoon. INCUBATE is a great start, but there's so much more that we could do, and I could go on forever.
Orawan, when you were trying to take this idea kind of and take it into the world, how did you do it? Did you kind of pitch it first at the university level and then go outside? How did it work for you?
I think I was at university, and I was just, I guess, like the idea I had, and, you know, just my desire to pursue the idea just overweighed everything else, and that was when I was at university. And I wish I knew about the INCUBATE program, or it existed during that period when I had that idea, because, you know, it was at a stage where I didn't know a program like that existed. And, you know, obviously at university you don't get encouraged at the moment to pursue anything that's entrepreneurial, and it's really just, you know, study, here's your exam, and here's your, you know, like, certificate. So that's basically like the whole process. But I think, like, with, you know, programs that INCUBATE is, you know, a really good, you know, stepping stone into, like, I guess, opening the world up with entrepreneurial, I guess, entrepreneurial ideas and activities in terms of, like, being able to pursue what you want to do. But like Petra was saying, I think it should be incorporated into university projects, like, even, like, I guess, you know, collaborating even with startups who need, I guess, people to help. And, you know, and get these people from university to come in and, like, solve, you know, have a university project around these startups' problems and how do you solve them, and then get them to think in that way. And I think that's something that they should, I guess, involve in their university criteria.
It's interesting to hear you talk about, you know, involve that link with the real world as part of the actual curriculum there, because I don't know, I have a sense that in Australia there's sometimes less interaction between possibly the university and the real world than might happen overseas. You know, you see a lot more of kind of professors in the media or in business or kind of being in all of those different worlds. Does that happen enough in Australia?
No.
I guess no.
No, it doesn't happen enough. I mean, so a couple of comments there. I was fortunate, and I did grad studies at Stanford. And I didn't go to Stanford to learn to be an entrepreneur. I went there because I was interested in studying what was then called artificial intelligence. I don't know if we call it AI anymore, but machine learning. And a funny thing happened. Everyone I met was excited about entrepreneurship and startups. It was like in the ether, in the air. And, you know, it turns out, you know, Stanford is at the heart of Silicon Valley. But I didn't know that. It was like pure serendipity on my part. But so it's not just the university, but it's the whole, you know, ecosystem of which the university, in the case of Silicon Valley, it's like the combination of the universities, the companies, the startups, just kind of creating this atmosphere of entrepreneurship. So, and that's something, you know, that's basically culture. The second thing that the US has, I guess, going for them is, you know, their academics don't get paid over the summer. What does that mean? Well, they're kind of encouraged to go out and do things. you know, there might be some academics in the room who might not like it if I was to suggest that maybe that would be something we adopt in Australia. But you know, that has definitely had a profound impact on transfer of, you know, knowledge between academia and into the real world. So it's definitely room for, my view is there's definitely room for improvement on that front in Australia.
And
Okay, lower pay for academics from Alan. Let's just note that down.
I like that.
What do you think?
And I
Rick?
think, well, I think Orawan had made a good point there about, you know, you can get caught up in the cycle of studying, lectures, tutorials, exams. You just hang out with your little crew. And so we're talking about all the wonderful things that can happen at uni to allow entrepreneurship. There's also some things that I think stifle the ability to crack out of that cocoon, and that is things like exams and just the general boring, mundane cycle of university. And you know, I love that there's things like this. I mean, it's things like this that change that and make things happen, and you know, get people to think a little differently and mix around and meet people who aren't just in their own course, and that's really important.
I think exams only took 2 weeks of a year, didn't they? Like that's all. That's all you need. But so do you think Incubate and things like this are starting to get these interconnections between universities and then your more real world entrepreneurialism thing established? And I guess the fact that Petra's now a lecturer, so you're actually getting that kind of interconnection between people in the real world and the university world occurring. Is that do you think that there's that needed at kind of all universities really?
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, things are happening, things are changing. I don't want to be too negative because I actually do see, you know, programs like Incubate, students going out there in the real world doing things whilst they're at university. So it's not all negative. It's happening. It's definitely happening. But you know, it's still the environment at the university needs to change, and it's different for different university. But I think oftentimes, particularly for academics, commercializing something might be seen as something dirty. Oh my God, I'm going to make money from my research. Whereas I think that's something that really needs to change. Now I'm talking about the researcher, but it's also true for, you know, students. You know, why do we see it as something ugly, dirty to commercialize something? Why don't we want to see the beautiful ideas and the fantastic stuff that comes out of university have an impact out in the market? I don't know why that seems to be still a bit of an issue. The culture, making money from something.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think it's probably also unrealistic to expect that all academics, I guess, have that kind of DNA to want to go off and commercialize stuff. Not because they think it's dirty, because it's just not their passion. Entrepreneurs need to be passionate. If you're going to be, you know, following your idea, building a business, you better be passionate about it. And you know, if your primary passion is research, that's not necessarily amenable to being an entrepreneur. However, we do need to make it really, really easy for IP to kind of be freed up from universities, and I see too many universities that are still very, very precious about their IP. It should be easier. If they don't want to commercialize it, or they're putting up barriers to commercialization, it should be a lot easier for an entrepreneur to come along and say, hey, I'd love to take this IP and maybe make a business from it. So that's an area where we can improve. I agree with Petra though. You know, there's a lot going on. This is not a negative story. We're talking about how can we accelerate, how can we make things happen faster. The fact that Incubate's gone from 1 to what, 4 universities or 5, I've lost count, is great. But getting that happening at every university would be even better. Yeah.
And with that, just we talk a lot about we're comparing to the US, but I just want to compare elsewhere. Are there other places that I guess have smaller markets, so kind of more Australian-sized smaller markets that have a very successful entrepreneurial spirit, or this kind of culture developed through universities or through businesses in their countries? You know, because we look a lot to that kind of American market, which obviously is different from Australia in some ways, and obviously we need to interact with that. But is this kind of thing done well elsewhere? That's a hard question. They only know America. That's all there is.
Yeah. There's a lot of examples. Rick, you wanna...
Well, I think Israel's the classic example everyone uses. It's a smaller country than Australia, but the number of companies per capita and the amount of venture capital per capita is 10 times.
Yeah, I think we spend $4.50 per capita on venture capital, and I think Israel's like $85 or something. It's like orders of magnitude. And that's just one indicator, but you know, that translates into startup company formation. So our formation rates are proportionally much lower than many other countries, bigger and smaller. Israel's a great example. I mean, you know, even Singapore, closer to home, is doing quite well in terms of, well, certainly VC funding and support. That's only one indicator, though.
Yeah, and it's not only the universities, it's also the issue we have at the moment that there's the National Pool of Savings superannuation is not at the moment allocating money through to venture capital.
Tell us
through
how you
to
think about
Australia.
that. You did a really interesting blog post about that.
I did thank you. My little rant is about superannuation disclosure laws and how the new disclosure laws will in fact hurt startups in Australia and make it more difficult for super funds to invest into venture capital and therefore into Australia's innovation startup community. But you can read about that on my blog.
So these are new laws coming in now?
These are new laws which are great and well-intentioned laws to make superannuation more transparent, but are going to have a side effect on the startup community. But I've been talking to lots of people. I've got my little message into Treasury, into Malcolm Turnbull, into ASIC. So we're hopefully going to get something to change, get an exception for venture capital.
It is amazing how often these small little changes at the bottom of some piece of legislation have these roll-on effects that no one actually...
Well,
exactly.
Particularly important for student entrepreneurs. You know, if you're a seasoned entrepreneur that's done 2 or 3 companies, you can always raise money. You know, I mean, if you've got a track record. But if you're a student entrepreneur, first-time entrepreneur, you know, it's hard. You know, or harder, certainly. And so that's why we need better access. And so this is one example where we can dramatically improve access to capital.
Yeah, we've got to see the venture capital community, which is sort of in a rebuilding itself at the moment, get into the universities and spend more time with them. And it's our responsibility as well. It's not just the universities to drag people in and people out. We've got to be reaching into them as well.
Well, this is true. I mean, what is your... Do you have kind of university level entrepreneurs working with you guys, and how did that start? And I guess, what could they do? What could the people here who are wanting to do that do to make sure, to make that more likely?
So two ways. We probably should have more university people come through our office, be part of what we're doing, be part of our process, and that's a really good idea. In terms of backing people, I've got one really good example, which is a company called CoinJar, which is a Bitcoin company. It's Australia's leading Bitcoin exchange, which we've backed at Blackbird Ventures, and the founder there is 19 years old and still at university down in Melbourne. And that's it. Now, this is his second Bitcoin business. So it can be done, and there are people who will back student entrepreneurs.
And did he just come and pitch to you? Is that the...
He went through an incubation program, not an accelerator, not INCUBATE, but went through an accelerator, and we caught him at the end of the accelerator, him and his business partner. His business partner's sort of 23-ish. And it was very clear that this team and these 2 individuals together knew more about Bitcoin than almost anyone else in Australia, and really had a unique take on it, and had started to make it sort of Bitcoin for ordinary people, and that's what we loved. We loved that angle, and so we jumped behind it, and it's really taken off. It does about 60% of Bitcoin transactions in Australia at the moment, which is pretty awesome.
Wow, it's very good. So basically, they incubate. It's interesting to hear Sally earlier talk about this, Sonia, that to watch the difference between the first pitches that she initially saw and to watch them now. Is that the kind of thing? I mean, can university do that? Should people be doing pitches in their classes and figuring out that kind of stuff? Did you ever do anything like that at university?
You'd have like boring presentations, but you wouldn't be doing pitches that you feel like matters. For example, like with the Incubate Demo Day, you'd feel like, oh, there's investors there, there's media there, you should actually do a pretty good presentation. Whereas at university, you're like, oh, it's just based on my mark, and really it's just about hitting the right points that you need to hit with a presentation at uni. Yeah, so I think there should be more, I guess, pitches in the classroom.
So you only really fire up if there's millions of dollars in the audience, pretty much. That's your approach. Just for marks, she doesn't bother really. Doesn't even whip out the PowerPoint.
PowerPoint's evil, by the way. Don't use PowerPoint.
Don't use PowerPoint. There's a tip for you.
Canva. Use Canva.
Use Canva. That's right.
Yes.
Another great Aussie startup founded by not students, but just not too far out of university.
Not too far out of university. They were over in Perth and now moved to Sydney, and have raised money from some of the top VCs in Silicon Valley, as well as Blackbird Ventures, and doing really well. Awesome company. Check out canva.com.
And just with the notion you say they've raised money overseas, because you talk about the fact there's a problem with the superannuation funds, there's a problem of the amount of funding in Australia. Can university-based people, is it possible to kind of look to overseas initially? Have you got to be doing that and going, look, this is not necessarily going to be picked up in Australia. I can be at university and I can go, well, I'm going to go look overseas.
So that's definitely an option, and there are a certain percentage of Australian entrepreneurs, whether they be students or just after being students or not students at all, who will just go to Silicon Valley and do it there, and that's fine. That'll always happen. But I think what's really encouraging is that now it's possible and absolutely doable to do it from Australia, to start that thing in Australia, to get it funded by the Australian angel community, many of whom are here today, who are funding really good founders. And now I think if you are a really good founder with a good team and a good product hitting a big market, you should be able to raise $250K to $1 million from the angel community in Australia, and that's really good. The funding gap really is the next stage when you want to raise $3 to $5 million.
So $1 million is easy, guys. It's just 5 million that's hard, apparently.
And I actually think Australia is a great place to try your idea out as well. It's a good test bed. I mean, obviously it depends on your product or service, whatever it is that you're doing, but oftentimes it's a really good place to start and make sure that you got that business model right before you go overseas.
So it's a good test,
I have a view on that.
You have a view, I know you do.
Can I give my view on that?
Yeah.
Give your view.
And then I'll be quiet for a while. I reckon global day one. I think there's no reason to test it in Australia now. If you have this type of product that can be sold using digital marketing to a global audience, you should be doing it absolutely global day one, and people shouldn't know or care that you're Australian.
But that's the caveat. He said, if you've got the kind of product that can be sold globally, then you should be. There are products that really, in fact, our panelists last night, Pocketbook, which is personal finance management, they have to do integrations with banks. It's one bank at a time. It's natural for them to work with the Australian banks first, build up their business. So, yeah. Yes, if it makes sense to go global, go for it. But, it depends on the business.
Yeah, and if I can just say also, I mean, oftentimes people don't do customer validation, and that really is, that's the number one thing I see why startups fail, because they don't engage with customers. And if you are in Australia, obviously, yes, you can engage with global customers as well, but I do think that going out, talking to customers, making sure that you got the idea right before you go out and build it is really, really important. And that's, yeah.
I think you can start your business in Australia. I spoke to someone who was in the Valley and who was, starting his own business there. And we were just talking about, talent in terms of Australian talent with developers. And, the developers here in Australia are pretty good compared to the ones over in the Valley. That's what I've been told. And in terms of, paycheck and, it's very similar. That's as well as the harder thing with doing it in the Valley, I think, is more so the competition with other startups. People are less loyal to your own startup and more willing to, hop to different startups because whether it's going to be successful or not. Whereas in Australia, I feel like they'll be more loyal to your startup, and developers will be just as good.
Is MakeUpSocial, is that Australian based or is that globally based? How does that work?
70% of our users are from the US, so we're based out of here, but it's a global audience because makeup is a global topic. Yeah.
And I second Orawan's comments about the talent base in Australia is second to none. We have exceptional talent coming from our universities, and it's one of the reasons why companies like Google are here. It's for the talent and for the coffee. But seriously, there's no reason why you can't have your cake and eat it. Go global from a user or customer standpoint, but keep your base here. Take advantage of the talent, technical and business talent we have available coming out of our universities. It's a great combination, and I think they're probably right now at this point in the ecosystem, there probably is a bit less churn between companies. Perhaps when we have 1,000 times more startups, we'll start to resemble Silicon Valley a bit more, but that would be a good problem to have.
It's interesting at a university-based level, because I think there's a perception, I think, that it's about people who are doing software and coding and all that kind of stuff. But I know that just from my own personal experience, when friends and I talked about startups, you start hitting, you go, well, actually, we need a lawyer here. This is this is a legal problem or this suddenly becomes a different. It's actually, you know, a startup covers a lot of different faculties there. I mean, probably no one here can answer it, but does Incubate look at kind of, I guess, across the faculties, getting people from all the different faculties involved rather than just those that might be, you know, science, med and all that kind of stuff? Because you need to create that entire environment within the university of you know, the lawyers getting involved. We know they are sadly a part of every business. You know, is that an important part of getting that expertise? Is often one of the hardest things to do as a you know, startup. Is that something that needs to be done more at university level as well?
So encourage the cross-pollination between faculties and disciplines. Absolutely. I think, you know, Orawan's company is a great example. You know, Orawan said she didn't have a technical background, but a lot, and you know, the opportunity is in this complete. It's like this. It's about as far removed from technology, like fashion, and yet if you can kind of marry the business idea with some technology, bring the two together, you've got something really, really powerful. So that only happens when cross-pollination is happening. You want people in, you know, the life sciences and in, you know, fashion and in finance, talking with, you know, the technical folks, and that's, I think, where a lot of great ideas come from. So yeah, we need to encourage that kind of cross-pollination for sure. And that's another reason why a lot of it, you know, universities are great, because you're all in there, you know, and you're hopefully meeting people from other faculties and, you know, getting to know what their issues are.
How do we force them to do it?
I don't think you force people to go mingle with lawyers. No. I might mingle with the fashion crowd, though. That sounds a bit cooler.
I'm not going to plug my hackathon here, but what it was essentially actually doing exactly that, getting students from different faculties of the universities and forcing multidisciplinary. We did force them.
How do you force them?
You force through the application process. No. This was a competition, but it was all for students.
Right.
And what was forced was that the teams were multidisciplinary, and they went. So we had lawyers, we had designers, we had people that had absolutely no lab experience go into a lab and solve a medical problem. Non-medical people solving a medical problem. We had 4 patents coming out of this. So it works. And it's amazing, but you've got to do more of it. You've got to do more of it. I don't have the answer to how you do it, but cross-pollination and getting those, and convergence of technology is really exciting, and get some truly disruptive stuff happening if you can somehow make it happen.
Did you do that with universities? And how did you do it?
Yes. With Sydney Uni, UNSW, UTS and ANU. So those 4 universities were involved in this.
And then you've patented stuff out of that as well?
Well, not we, but students, yes. There were patents filed as a result of this competition, yes.
Okay, that sounds like, are you doing it again?
Our lawyers hated it because we had a bunch of untrained people in a lab. We are doing it again, but I'm recovering still. Put it that way.
From the lawyers can help, but also hinder the process, can't they?
Yeah.
That's an awesome example of just getting something and just doing it, right?
Yeah.
And breaking some rules as you do it.
Nothing exploded, but yeah. Could have happened.
Great. So if a non-doctor is operating on your suit, you know why. I came up with this great idea. I know I was an art student, but it's fine.
But INCUBATE is a great program because the way that it runs is it's got mentors, and all mentors have different backgrounds, and so you will have access to, and Orawan can comment on that because she's been through INCUBATE, but you have access to people that have expertise, legal expertise, copyright expertise, whatever it might be. So it's a great program to go through and be able to access all those different competencies that you need as a startup.
I might take some questions to the audience in a second, because I'm interested in kind of people who are trying to do startups, where they're kind of feeling like they're hitting their head. Like, where do you feel like you go, we get to this step, and this is where we don't know what the next step is, or this is where we feel like we want to know, how to get there, or if it's been answered, if Incubator's now made it so there are the links to the other broader community, whether you go to Fishburners or whatever. So, but yeah, so just any questions? Is anyone in the audience that's trying to do a startup? Where are the times where you find problems? Do you have any questions for our panel here?
Don't be shy.
Good morning. Great panel. Thanks. Just a question for your app and reaching to the global market. What was your first steps to get in the US? Did you just load it up and they're the people who picked it up? Or, yeah, that's the question. How did you get there first?
Yeah, we basically just uploaded it and people from the US came. Yeah, and I think it's more so towards our topic, which is beauty, and I find that I guess people from the US are more interested than people from Australia. Or maybe there's just a bigger market there.
We're uglier here.
Natural beauty.
We're natural.
That's a really good example of how you can, from a small team in Australia, hit this global market, right? And you couldn't do that 10 years ago. Yeah. It was very, very difficult to do, and that's one of the reasons why the Australian startup ecosystem inside and out of universities is gathering so much momentum, is you can do that now.
It's actually almost hard not to reach the global market. I mean, think about it. Has anyone ever written a blog? If you write in English, you'll find from day one, 70% of your readers or more are in the US, because that's the language of the internet. Ditto, you upload an app or an app on Facebook or wherever, and again, it's just the way the world is. The big populations are outside, so you always have to try hard if you didn't want to reach an overseas audience or global audience. But obviously, there's things you can do to encourage it in how you present to the users. But
I guess it depends on apps are one thing. It depends what you're dealing with. What are you trying to get to the global audience?
So you'll see it a bit later on, I'm guessing, through the pitch. But yeah, we've created an app that benefits students for basically what you're talking about, connecting them across departments, across campuses, and for all different types of categories. And definitely the US is a lot bigger market than Australia for students.
Well, you think about it, when you download an app, you don't really know where it comes from, do you? It doesn't make much difference, does it?
Well,
sorry, go Alan.
I was just going to say, one concrete suggestion is, you want to become like the thought leaders in this, right? So you've got a bit of awareness about, what you have. So, that's something to think about.
Do you have another question? Any other questions for the panel?
Hi, thanks everyone for your comments this morning. In terms of your growth strategies, you talk about startups trying to scale, trying to, I guess, step out of that terminology of being a startup. So what are some really interesting growth strategies you've seen? Is it just been surreptitious luck, or is it sort of a lot of hard work? The different styles of growth strategies to get out of being a startup and actually being I guess, fully fledged company.
You go, Rick. Okay, good. So
I'll say one thing while Rick's thinking. You build a really, really good product. I mean, world class. People are like insanely in love with your product. You really won't have a problem getting users. I know that sounds simplistic, and it's coming from an engineer, but I really do believe the right product, the right offering makes a huge difference.
So that's exactly where I'm going to start. That's good. So lots of people, this is something I say quite a lot, lots of people build a product, right, and then they try and figure out how they're going to market that product, and the marketing sort of has to fit the product. I often find the best products, or the ones that actually make it, are those where you design the marketing strategy and the product is actually built to be able to be sold and marketed in that way. And that goes partly to this idea of what's global and what's not, and whether you want to be global or not, and whether you actually change your product and change the whole business that you're building because you want it to be global versus Australian. The key way that people are marketing right now is content marketing. And content marketing, as you all know, is all about having a really strong voice in the market, a viewpoint that's usually different from the rest of the market, and being really on message on that, and building really high quality content marketing. It used to be 5 or 6 years ago that when content marketing was fairly new, that it could be fairly crappy content that drove people to your site, and we saw these content farms come out and all this sort of stuff. And now content marketing is really, really difficult because you've got to have super high quality content for people actually to want to read it, take the time, and we're just bombarded with blogs and tweets and everything. So content marketing is clearly it. I think if you look at someone like Canva, their content marketing and their view in the market that that Adobe is for professionals, and Word and PowerPoint, people do graphic design in Word and PowerPoint if they're ordinary people, and that's usually a bad result. So they're building this thing in the middle, beautiful design for ordinary people. Their combination of content marketing, blogging, tweeting, all that sort of stuff, plus their PR, has been really good. And in 6 months, they've signed up 300,000 people from all over the world to use their product. And so I think that the one other thing I'd say is that there's hardly ever a silver bullet. It's usually 100 different small things that you do, and and it's starting by just scattergun, try crazy things, brainstorming, trying to hack things, trying to get lists from somewhere and hack them, try and do crazy things. And then as you get a little bit better at it, it's learning about how you test those things in a sort of process-based and logical way, and then starting to learn which of those 100 things you did actually had an effect and had the effect that you wanted to have, you know, when you trace down through the metrics. And then it's starting to look at those and how you can scale each of those little processes and building a repeatable process around each of those. And it's that sort of, I guess, maturing of your marketing that's really interesting as you go from being in a really early startup to, you know, a startup that's starting to fire.
That leads to a question. Do you generally find, I mean, do you expect people who are at the university level who are trying to pitch to you to have, you know, started the product and been developing the product, or do you, you know, does it ever work at the idea level? I mean, I've heard very different stories about this, and I know that some of the people who've come through INCUBATE kind of go, well, in actual fact, I didn't have a business plan, I just pitched an idea, and that's where I got the money. You know, can people pitch at that idea level, or do you expect people to have really worked it out?
So at Blackbird, we're focused on what we call late seed as the early stage we'll invest. So we're looking for product in the market in the hands of a core set of happy users. And then we want to see the metrics around the engagement and quality of use. And that's really important for Blackbird. But I think for, you know, what's wonderful is for programs like INCUBATE and all of the other accelerators that are around Australia is that, you know, that is more about the concept and idea plan and people who can articulate a really strong idea. And then it's more about a great, you know, a really interesting idea in a big space, and then trying to prove that you're the right person to deliver on that idea. And often it's easier to sell an idea, right, because you're selling blue sky. As soon as you have the product in the market and the reality of people and growth, and it's, you know, it's never as.
I'm glad, Rick. I mean, ideas come cheap, really. I mean, if you can't take that idea and at least build, you know, something a bit more concrete, you know, proof of concept, prototype, you know, minimum viable product. You know, to me, that's part of the validation too, and getting your first users is validation. Metrics. I know Rick said testing. What he's talking about is making sure every single aspect of your product is instrumented to the nth degree. There's a lot of free tools out there like Google Analytics that can do that for you. You don't have to invest a fortune in it. You should know how every nanosecond of your user is spent on your app or your website. If you don't know that, you're missing information, and then you need to analyze and figure out what are the most important metrics, and then build a dashboard. I think that's one of the things you guys do. You kind of help your portfolio companies build a dashboard so they can basically track the most important metrics for their business.
It's a very important part of what, when we invest, we really want to see those types of companies that do that and measure in that way. But the point is to having a product and just doing it. I think that's a really, really good point, because we're seeing more and more. So we're involved with the StartMate accelerator, and we're seeing more and more teams coming to StartMate, not with an idea, but actually a product that's either built in the hands of some customers. And so the great thing about technology today and the stacks and the, you know, people like Google and, you know, all the other hosting providers is that you can build fairly easily a professional, scalable, marketable website, and then you can start the marketing all with $0 out. You might pay a few $100s to run a server, right? That's true. But it's literally nothing. We saw last year, I use this example a lot, an enterprise software company which is selling a quite sort of mid-tier sort of bit of middleware in the stack that helps improve. Basically, it's technology, selling to technologists and these guys had got 6 or 7 clients. They were doing $16K in revenue a month. There were 2 founders, and I said, "How much have you invested? In, you know, what funding round have you got?" And they said, "No funding round. We've just done it ourselves." And I said, "How much have you invested?" And they said, "Oh, you know, $1,000." And I said, "Each?" And they said, "No." All up. And, you know, they'd done it, right?
Yeah.
They could code, right? That comes back to my first thing.
Cloud computing's changed the game here. You know,
it's changed the game.
You pay as you go. You make sure your product doesn't. You don't want to build, you know, something bigger than Ben-Hur before you have the users to justify. So you do need to make sure you're scaling appropriately too. But if you do that right, you can scale your business, you know, and pay as you go, and very, very cost effectively.
But just do it, right?
Just Orawan, what had you made your app first? Did you get funding first? What was your process?
I agree with Alan that you need some sort of validation. I think for us it was our Facebook group. Before we even built anything, we had some sort of validation. So we built a community around Facebook, and we had around 8,000 members on that. And it's like, okay, cool, like, you know, people like this, and engagement was really high. So that's when we were like, hey guys, should we build an app out of this? And then, you know, we get feedback, we get validation, and then that's when we went out and built an app.
Yeah. So you, at what stage did you actually get funding? Was it the before you built the app, or did you not even do it at that stage?
The problem with me was that I couldn't code, so I did need the money to outsource to build the actual product. So it was at a stage where I validated the idea in terms of getting some sort of, you know, community around the idea, and then raising money to build out the product.
Goes back to a lesson learned to code.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also love that story of hacking together the community on Facebook, right? That shows you can do these sorts of things, you know, you obviously got to have a basic knowledge of technology, and then, you know, I bet you learned heaps about how you actually promote that Facebook page and how it works and how you drive users to it, and, you know, maximize engagement once they're on it and get them to come back and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's like super, super important, and you can do that with, you know, just the basics, you know.
Just want to talk to Petra, because you deal with sometimes that, you know, at that kind of app and web development level, there's a certain level of access you can get straight away, but you're often dealing with things that,
Well,
I guess, have a higher barrier to entry.
Correct.
And
So I look at you know, IT, web, mobile, but also hardware and life sciences and how that comes together. So I suppose the companies that I deal with have a very strong IP position, and if it's an IT, it's proprietary software, algorithm, whatever it might be. So I look at stuff at an earlier stage, I would say, than you. So what I look at when we, you know, look at applications to the incubator, because again, it's different if it's an accelerator program or an incubator. When I look at applications, I do the very early stage, and I look at the team, and I want to see a team. I don't want to see just one person. I want to see a team, and I want that team to have preferably complementary skills. Very important complementary skill set. And then it's about the execution. Can this team execute on the idea? And if it's hardware, obviously, it's a little bit different than if it's just an app, because it's different. You know, you need to do more validation. You can't scale too early because that could kill you. So it's very different depending on where idea comes from. If it's an app, again, if it's hardware or even life sciences, it's very different. So, you know, it's a hard question to answer. Yeah. But we're now focusing very much on app tonight, and, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have an idea that is an app based, you know, talk to Petra. There is a.
Or if it's app based, we don't mind, as long as it's not a lifestyle business, because then we do mind.
Yeah.
It's got to be a full-time gig.
It's got to be a full-time gig.
It's got to be a full-time gig for us.
Full-time
yes.
makeup. Okay.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Can we please thank our panel, Rick, Petra, Orawan, and Alan, ladies and gentlemen. It's been very enlightening. And I'd now like to introduce to the stage our first speaker of the day, Tim Westergren, who's the founder of Pandora Radio.
I had no idea what time zone I'm in right now, so I think we're morning or the afternoon. So nice to be in a room full of budding entrepreneurs. I thought that maybe what I would do is give you all kind of a quick thumbnail of our little entrepreneurial journey that has turned into Pandora today. I have taken and we have taken a pretty unusual route to get to where we are now, and I think sort of in that experience are probably a lot of learnings for anybody that is interested in starting a business. And I'm happy to take some questions too, so hopefully we can leave some time at the end for some questions. Just a quick backgrounder on me. I'm a musician, so I came to Pandora having I spent about 15 years trying to make a living at it. My first, some chuckles, exactly, that's what it is for music. My first job out of college, I went to Stanford as an undergrad, so out in Silicon Valley. And I was majoring in poli-sci, which is Stanford's shortest major. It allowed me to experiment and do a lot of things. And I got out of school with a passion for music, but no sort of real idea of exactly what I would do to make a living. So the first job I had was a nanny. I was a nanny for 5 years. That was my first job. Actually, Manny